What's up? Billy from Pastures farm here. Today we're going to talk about the compost within this chicken tractor on steroids system. Alright, so here we are. I think this is week 9. Don't quote me on that, I think it is. Anyway, when I say week 9, it's not entirely within this chicken tractor on steroid system. That's just the number of weeks that the chicks have been alive. So within this system, you can't see it right now, but up the hill we got one pile that consists of week 1 and 2. The next pile, week 3 and 4. This is week 5. And you might see this little thing poking in here behind me. I want to use it because it is a very frosty morning. It has been for the last couple of mornings. And there's been frost accumulation, but I want to give you a complete understanding of how this compost works within this system and how you can benefit. Now, if you look at this thermometer behind me, we're about 128 degrees, which is perfect. It's composting, it's active, it's doing exactly what it ought to do. And this compost has only been going for about a week. Today will mark a week since we started it. And all it is the bedding from the inside. For anybody that's new, it's the bedding from the inside of their chicken tractor, and then we put their food on it, and then we layer it all the way up until Wednesday, until we get the equivalent of about 1.5 cubic yards. Now, remember, I'm doing this to show you in this particular example of how we keep the water from freezing. If it's 130 degrees in that pile, believe me, even if the ambient temperature were at 0, if you met it halfway, this thing is not going to freeze, and it doesn't. In fact, when you leave it there overnight, you'll find out that it's actually quite warm. With that said, remember, today's Sunday, so we're going to break this thing down, and we're going to start a new pile. But I'm going to take this thermometer, let it cool off for a minute, and we're going to walk back to these other piles to kind of give you an understanding as to what's going on. Now, remember, every Sunday we flip all the piles. So that pile up there, it's finished. Maybe not completely finished, but it's mostly finished, because in that particular pile, we used all those store-bought wood chips from, let's say, Tractor Supply, and they're a little bit tougher to break down. But for the most part, it is finished compost. But let's go ahead and stick our thermometer in here just to see. I very seldom use a thermometer. We're just going to see what it's doing. All right, so this pile here, this is week 3 and 4. We stick our compost thermometer down in there, and we're somewhere around 118 degrees, which is absolutely perfect. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. There's no frost on this pile, you can obviously tell. And in some cases, you will see frost at the bottom on the really cold nights, but on the inside is where the magic is happening. So when we flip this pile, we're going to make absolutely sure that the stuff on the outside composes what's going to be on the inside. Okay, so that's weeks 3 and 4. We're going to go on back to this pile. This pile will not be quite as hot as the previous pile, or it may be about the same. But that's cool. That's where all the magic is happening. Now, this is the pile that we're going to call finished compost. It's not entirely finished. Like I said, I used pretty big wood chunks, and it's not completely worked over, but you can see a distinct difference in the color of this pile as it becomes closer and closer to compost. So what's going to happen today? We're going to take this stuff. The whole net behind me is going to go over this side of the pile. We're going to slinky the net down the hill. And the weeks 3 and 4 pile will be at the end. So every week or every 2 weeks from here on out, we're going to get the equivalent of 3 cubic yards of compost, and that is fantastic. But in a case like this, like, okay, my temperature's about the same as the other one, a little bit lower, say about 116. What's cool is now we're going to treat it like an 18-day Berkeley pile, because it isn't broken down, because I used bigger wood chips. But that's the beauty of compost making. You can start, stop, you can kick it up, you can do whatever. We're going to flip it, add a little moisture to it, cover it up, leave it alone. And this thing will be compost complete by next week. If I wanted, I could, in fact, leave it here another week. I don't have to. This is where, in the words of Joel Salatin, you can't Google experience. I have quite a bit of experience within this, and it takes practice. But don't let that discourage you in giving it a shot if you feel at least conversational with compost making and also with rearing chickens. because it's a sublime, beautiful system once you get it down. But it does take some practice and it does take some time. So with that said, we're gonna move this net. I'm gonna move this net and we're gonna flip this pile, cover it up, and it's off to the races. And we're just gonna complete this system. The beauty again about this system is that it can go on indefinitely if you choose to run your chickens this way. Now, I've been asked, how many chickens do you need for this? This isn't scientific, but I'm gonna give you my best judgment. If you have just layers in the system that are just exclusively layers, I'm not talking dual purpose birds, I think you need, the magic number is somewhere at a minimum of about 30 to 32 birds. If it's dual purpose birds, you need about 28 birds for this system to make it work the way it should. For these meat birds that we're running in this system right now, along with a few of the layers that are gonna, and they're dual purpose, that are eventually gonna go in with the other flock, you need about 21 of those birds. Reason being, they move, they're much bigger birds and they move material like you would not believe. So those are my numbers. If anybody has something different, by all means, I'm not the end all be all, but that's the numbers I'm aware of. So with that said, it's time to get hot. These guys are ready to get out of that tractor. All right, so there we have it. Week 9, and now we're really starting to get down to brass tacks on this compost making. So like I said, folks, this one here had the highest carbon, big chips. And we're always experimenting with this stuff. So we got the big chips. So it's gonna need to break down over this next week. But if you look at the piles behind me, you'll see the one closest to me within the fence, it's a little bit darker. You can see the process unfolding, the composting process unfold. That's what's so cool about this part of it, is that it's easier to demonstrate how this thing happens. This one was darkest because it's closest to being compost. The one over my shoulder, we're not gonna have anywhere near the problems that we had with this one, just because the pieces are much smaller, so they're gonna break down better. Also within this pile, we had a bunch of old rotten store-bought pig food that we used for the last pigs just to kind of get them started. And it wasn't any good anymore, so we decided to just use it up in this pile. And if you do that sort of thing, you want to count that as your nitrogen. So that's exactly what we did. We just kind of layered it in there, and this pile will just kind of work and do its thing for now. And of course, I'll come back with the compost thermometer, make sure it's not getting too hot. Now the pile's over my shoulder. You can see the process unfold. That's the beauty of this system, is that if you're teaching someone, is that it's easier to see that, hey, this one's really dark. The one behind me, not as dark. And the one we just flipped out there in the furthest in the distance is rather light. But as the process unfolds and the birds do their thing, it all comes together, folks. And just a quick shout out to Jeff Lawton for coming up with such a brilliant design and allowing me the opportunity and my family to tweak it to a way that works for us. So with that said, this is Billy, the Permaculture Pimp Daddy, where PIMP stands for Permaculture is my passion, because it really is. We'll see you next time.